Sure.
Hola, Stephanie.
Hola.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien.
Vale. No sé si Fernanda iba a aparecer hoy. Todavía. Do you prefer we speak in English or in Spanish?
English.
Okay,
My
perfect.
Spanish has just gone. Zoom. I'm actually stuck in the United States. I've been stuck here since March.
Oh,
So my Spanish as a result has just taken a quick nosedive. I'm not using it
okay.
anymore. Here, let me
Yeah.
get a better spot where I don't have the backlight.
Okay.
Okay. There we go. That's better. Okay.
Okay. I will try to use my better English. It's not like the best, but I will try my best.
That's okay. We'll Spanglish it up. No judgment either way.
Excellent. So I don't know if Marta told you something about what we are doing with the magazine.
Very
Okay,
little. Yeah.
okay. So basically, the idea is that the magazine is not moving around a lot. People are not reading the magazine, and we want to change some strategic elements and make it with a more with a design focus, so it can have more public and people can use it in better, more and better ways. So we're speaking with a lot of people, like teachers at the university, like people from the editorial committee editorial. Yeah.
See.
Um, so the idea is to grab some ideas from them and from you, and basically it's more to rethink the idea of sharing scientific knowledge.
Right.
It's like maybe doing well graphic design for a text publication is not the same as reinventing the whole thing, like the interaction we want to do. So we know that you already work doing some of this stuff. So it would be great
Yeah.
if you can explain to us like what's exactly what you do.
Yeah. Martha was like, please talk to them, please. That's what she was like, I need you to talk to them. I was like, okay, Martha. That's what Martha told me.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
I have a really weird role, which is why it was so hard for me to answer the encuesta. Um, so my background, I have a PhD in science education. I do have a science background, undergrad, like pregrado, and then I have an oceanography master's. I speak science, which is probably why I have been successful in the Facultad de Ciencias, is because I am a scientist and I'm an education person. Because they don't tend to like education people. They just don't speak the same language.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, so I kind of function there in education. We have this position called discipline-based education researcher. They don't call Uniandis doesn't call me that, but I would say that's how I function. Basically, it's like your in-house education person who does education specific for science or whatever subject you're in. And so that's kind of what I do. I do a lot of research, mostly with professors. Um, and I have a lot of programs and workshops I do with them, trying to help them um, enjoy teaching and love teaching and make it student centered and kind of really do more than just the lecture format of teaching. Yeah, so I do a lot of workshops with that. And I have a year program that I do with them as well. What else do I do? So there's a lot of research with that. Oh, I do a lot of one-on-one coaching too. So professors, if they ever need anything, I'm just kind of like your answer person. If I can't find the answer, I have a big international network of science education people. I'll find the answer. I'm very, very well connected. We have a really good community. It's very nice. I actually like built this huge Excel sheet with every subject in science, like every virtualization like app program that you'd want. It's in my Excel sheet. Like for physics alone, I think there's like 300 different options, and they're all like categorized by the type of content that professors can easily find it. Um, then I also do the same. I do some programs with graduates teaching assistants, but not as many, and it depends on the department. So very involved with biology and physics, more so than chemistry or math. And then geo does not have any. And then I do a lot of research as well. So do creating educational projects. I have quite a few with physics. A lot of my projects actually have about, I think I counted yesterday, it's 15, but a lot of them have been put on hold because of COVID-19. The priority right now is survive.
Yeah.
We can. So yeah, I do a lot of projects too where we look and kind of assess what the actual change in learning is, how like measuring the educational impact. So I'm really big on that because I hate to say it, but at Uniandis a lot of times they have great ideas, but because they don't have like a strong education person there, they don't always go about measuring the best way. So a lot of times other facultatis will depend on student surveys. And for me, that's really problematic because students are the audience. So they have a bias because they are the one receiving the grades, the notas. So for them, getting them to self-report is a really problematic situation. So I really try to I like getting their feedback, but I think it's just one facet. So I do a lot where we'll do actual conceptual change models and look at how their skills have changed, how their knowledge has changed, how their attitudes have changed from a way that's more than just them giving feedback. Like for example, I could see like with hypothesis is like looking at measuring their ability, like if they were taking a class, actually a class like mine, where they were reading science, it'd be really interesting to see how does their skill of reading science, like a science article, improve. Like can't they know very quickly kind of the structure of an article? Do they know where they could quickly go and get like the thesis statement? And where they could maybe, if I were to ask a certain question, could they just real quickly go, oh, I'm going to look here. I think that would be, way better that we see students learning those skills and assess kind of that change than just asking them like their perceptions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess the
And
last thing, oh, no, you go.
How do you measure that, for example?
Several ways. One could be just, I could see, well, I mean, for this specific example, it could just be a series of questions where you have an article and they actually have to do it. And then they have to not just give the correct answer, but they have to explain their thought process. I would want to validate that as well, because whenever you create an encuesta, you have to do a validation reliability measures to make sure it's measuring what you intended. So I would probably do some think aloud protocol, TAP. Have you heard of that?
No.
So think aloud protocol is really great for understanding the student experience, because if you give just an encuesta, you don't know how they're interpreting the question. But what you could do, usually it's about 30%. So if you did an encuesta with, 200, you try to take maybe like 60 of them and do like a session where it's one-on-one. And basically what you do is you have them, in this case, you would give them an article and say, okay, you have this scientific article, you have these questions, you have to do like answer these questions about it. I want you to actually talk out loud, think out loud. What are you going through? What are you doing? And so that way you get that metacognitive approach, not just the answer. So you can actually understand, not because we don't really care so much if they can get the right answer, more so are they going about it the right way? And so you can really get their thinking. The one thing that's tricky about think aloud protocols is you usually have to do a training session with all the participants beforehand, because you can't, as the researcher, you can't interrupt them. Like you can't say, you don't want to be, presenting a bias by asking questions and interrupting their thinking. So usually when I do it, I do something like, cook me some rice. Like you're going to make me frijoles, arroz y frijoles. Tell me how you're going to do that. Think me through that from start to finish. And so I have them start thinking it out. And I even tell them, like, pretend you're doing it. Use your hands if you want. but then I will interrupt them and say, "Hey, wait, how are you already at this step? When did you buy the beans? Like, where did you get the beans? Like, how are they already going in the pot?" So I'll interrupt them and kind of show them, okay, so that they see that when we do it for real, I'm not going to interrupt them, but they got a sense of the level and how it's going to work. So I usually do a little one like that. Sometimes researchers do ones where it's like them getting dressed in the morning. I don't know why that creeps me out though.
Yeah.
I like cooking rice and beans.
Yeah. Okay. This is really interesting what you're saying. Like, especially because we're gonna launch here in November the survey for the students, and I would really like to look at this stuff that you're telling me because it's like it can change the focus that probably we are designing it. There's a person that is working on it, but probably he's looking into it more like in a traditional way. And these elements could work a lot. So, do you have this documented in any place or
Yeah,
something
I
so I can
probably have
watch it?
some. I probably have some because I know I've given it to some of my assistants. There's also a really great book I can share with you as well. I have a PDF version of it. There's a great book called
Okay.
what is it called? What is it called? Oh my gosh, I'm like seeing the colors. It's blue, it's green. It's a book all about making surveys. It's about this
Okay.
and it talks all about the science of it, how to like really make sure what you ask is what you really want it to ask, and that what the participants read or they're reading it correctly. What is it called? Oh, it's called
Do you remember the author?
Asking Questions.
Okay.
It's a great book. And then yeah, I have the book. I have a PDF version of it. I can send that
Okay.
to you.
If we could
And I can send
share
some
it.
of the TAP protocols. I have some of it somewhere.
Okay. And regarding the work you do with the teachers there in at the university, what exactly, or in what way do you teach them how to teach?
So I usually, it depends. One, the program I do, that's the year-long program. That one's the really in-depth way. And so we use the cognitive apprenticeship model.
Mhm.
It's a three-phase approach. It's the idea that we're going to use best practice of how we expect to teach students. We're going to do that the same with adults. We're not just going to stand up there and lecture, which is really problematic because the School of Education, which I used to work in, the dean loves to do that. He loves to give a workshop and lecture for 2 hours about active learning. And it's like, it's like, so the cognitive apprenticeship model, it's 3 phases during the year. So the first phase is elicitation. It's where I'm giving more information, but I do it through modeling. So I actually do activities that we'll actually do an activity, then we'll talk about it, we'll talk about the theoretical. So they're actually seeing a lot and they're engaging as the learner, but then they'll flip and do reflections, and then they'll be thinking of themselves as the teacher. And then phase 2 is where they're going to start integrating. So I have them make instructional goals. It's very personalized. I do a lot of observations. I actually give them data. So they get all these graphs because, science people like their graphs. So they get all these graphs on different domains of research, of teaching that I've collected about them. So they can actually see where they are. And then they create instructional goals. And some people, it's simply like getting my students more engaged. Some of it is I want to give better assessments so the students feel more confident. It's whatever they want, but they base it on what they've learned so far in phase 1 and this data that I've given them from observations and interviews. And so then they create a plan, and I work with all of them individually to come up with a plan. I help them find whatever resources they need to enact the plan. And it varies on the teacher. Some people get really hands-on. They want me to come in and co-teach. Others do their own thing and just want to talk about it. But during this time, we're doing these small sessions where it's 3 professors and myself, so the 4 of us, and each professor shares 5 to 7 minute of video of something that they've been trying to work on and improve. It relates to their goals, and they share their context of what they're trying to get feedback on. And then we watch it and then we give the feedback. And when we do the feedback, the professor with the video is outside the conversation and the three of us are talking, and it's in a real positive, like brainstorm sort of way. And then we do that for 20 minutes discussing ideas. And then the professor comes back in and they can ask more questions and get more ideas. And then we go to the next person. And they actually love that. They say that that's their favorite part because my job is to make sure it's really positive, it's really focused. I actually will cut professors off. I'm like, thank you for giving us an example of what we won't do. Sometimes, like I've had department chairs are like they try to make weaker professors go and watch really strong professors. I'm like, that doesn't work because that's not making it personal. This is I'm sharing something I'm working on. This is what I want feedback on. Give me all your ideas, and it's in a very positive, personalized, and like directive manner. And then the third phase is where they really they tried a lot of things. We figured out what worked, what didn't work. I don't like to tell teachers what to do. So the engineers I work with, they're hilarious. They're always like, Stephanie, just tell me what to do. They're like, give me a checklist. I'm like, you can't do what I do. I have a very different personality than you. I have one, you don't. So I don't say that to them, but that's like but my point is they can't do what I can do and I can't do what they can do. So by phase 3, we've really figured out what works for them. And then I try to push them to collect some student data. So at this point now, they're making their decision. And it's kind of like from phase 1, it's really focused. I'm the one giving the information. But by the end, I want to be a little player here. And I want them to be saying, well, I'm doing this, here's why, and have command and control. So it's really to change that for them to be more empowered. And that's the program I do. I do smaller workshops. This summer I did a lot, but for me still, whenever I do a workshop, it's still always going to have that modeling, reflection, some goal planning. How are you going to integrate this? And a lot of brainstorming. I really try not to do much lecturing. I feel like this is the most talking I do. I don't like talking.
Even anyway, this session is for you to talk, so
I know.
This is like a human sacrifice.
But even in my classes with students, so I do have a class with students. It's called Ciencias. It's a mandatory course that all of the students take in Facultad de Ciencias. I don't know what the course is really supposed to be about because we've had lots of committees and there's always a lot of arguments and we've been very circular. I know when we were meeting at one point, this one guy was like, it has to be about this. And we're like, okay, so we planned it around this. And then 3 months later, he's like, no. And he changed. I was like, wait, you were the one. We were doing this for you. Anyway, so the way I approach the class, because I do have a background teaching in colegios. I've been teaching for 18 years. But I've taught from like 12 años up through university. So I approach it just from what I think students need to know about science and what skills they need. It's mostly, I would say, habilidades. So we do a lot of how to read an article. I actually encourage my students to go to Hypothesis, but this is where it's really funny. They don't know how to access it. And to be honest, neither do I.
Yeah, this is a really bad sign.
So that right there, I was like, I said, and I know how to get some old articles, but I don't know where I'm getting them from. And they're like, well, how do you get them? I went, I don't know, but I'm trying to find out. I did ask, but people were like, I don't know. Yeah. So we talk a lot about how to read an article because they don't know how to read an article. I even have them do this exercise where it's like this table, and it's got criteria. and they get points, and it helps. And then at the bottom, it tells them if you got a sum of this score, this is an academic article. Here's why. If you get this score, it's probably something like Science American, where it's based on science, but it's being written for a popular audience. And then it will be like the lowest score is like, this is just pure crap.
Nonsense.
Crap, but you know what I mean. So I have them go through that too, and then I require them. It's so funny because they'll like, it's an 8-week course, so we just finished week 3, and so a lot of them will be like, "Hey, I read this article. Can I use this article? It's from here." And I say, that's a great question. How could you answer that? Could you use your table that we got in week 1? Why don't you tell me what the score is, and you tell me if you can use it or not? I know the answer to the question already, and I think they know I know that, but that's the point of the process.
Yeah, they have to do it. Yeah.
They need to learn how to do that. So they're not asking a professor. I want them to have that skill. Yeah. So I do that all the time. I'm like, hey, and that resource is in every week's lesson. It's one of the ones that I have them keep using because I want them to be able to read and tell me, is this a good source or not? And they lose points too on their assignments if they're not good sources.
And what about the interest in those themes? Like, how do you make that they have more interest in the contents that you're sharing to them? Like, because if you find like something that the title is really interesting, but the content it's impossible, you probably will say like, no, next thing, and you're not gonna try again or search for more about that. How do you use it?
So in week 1, another thing we do, and I have a guide for this, it's on how to read. It's like a little infographic, how to read a science article, and it tells them like you're gonna actually hold on. I can probably screen share if you give me 1 second.
Okay.
I can just share you. Sorry, that's much better than talking.
Do you find any difference between what happens to your young students than what happens to teachers?
No. No. It's funny because actually a lot of the things I do in this introduction science class are the same things I do with 12 years old. And that's not like a Columbia US thing. When I taught university in the US, it was the same way. It's just scaling it back to a different level that the 12-year-olds can understand. And the same is true with professors. It's always the same.
But why do you think that people fear complex knowledge?
I think that so this is actually getting into what my personal fascination is. It's this idea in science education, we call it the nature of science. All right, so this
grab a capture of this.
I'll send it to you.
Oh, okay.
I'm a sharer. I share everything. And that's the other thing is everything, and I actually make for the introduction science course, I always tell my students, you should use these tools the rest of your academic career. And any professor who asks me, I give them everything. But this, this is where they go through and answer the questions, and then you can see at the bottom, it tells them whether it's academic or not.
This is awesome.
Yeah. And I translated it, but did I have someone check my translation? Let me show you this other one. Yeah. Okay. This one. Yeah. So this is kind of helping them realize like how you go through, like you start with the abstract, and it's kind of, I think part of the reason why students sometimes have a hard time going about an article, it's that metacognitive. I don't know how to read the article.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't have a good structure for it. So of how they're going to attack it. And so this is helping them, whether it's academico or I call it popular.
Yeah.
They go through and they can. So here you can see it tells them to jump to the conclusion before they read all of this other stuff. So you're going to read the abstract, then you're going to jump to the conclusion, and then you're going to go back and read everything. Because that helps them understand a lot better, because they get the big picture anchored in their brain, and then they can start to make sense of all these complicated details that are going on. So they need to have like a construct created in their brain of where they're going. If they just try to read it straight through, they're trying to figure it all out and put it together without having a context, a construct there to anchor them to. So by just skimming, and it's not like a deep read, it's just a skim of the conclusion, and then let's go back and figure out what's going on.
And what about the complex words and like concepts that you only understand if you have researched this before, or I don't know, especially in mathematics, like I don't know, like in physics you can imagine some sort of things, like you read it, like you then search in Wikipedia and you can have like an idea of what it is. But in mathematics, it's like too abstract, and you have like many equations when you search for more, and it's like you never get to the point you can begin with.
I think that depends on. I don't do as much of this I like in the class, because I have all the disciplines in one course, which is fun, but also a disaster. Sorry, they're very different. Yeah, so different. Even the professors are very different. So I think it depends on what your purpose is. If your purpose is like you're in that major and you are going to be using this information for like a thesis project, or the senior project, that's different. If you're just reading it to just kind of see the bigger picture, because you're just kind of wanting to expand your general knowledge, but you don't need to necessarily know the individual formulas. I think this is where, for that, if you just read the conclusion, for many people, that really is sufficient. And so then what you do as you're reading is you try to just constantly be making the connections to the bigger picture. If it is a detail that you don't need, you can actually just ignore it, believe it or not. Now, for those students who do need the details, because this is something they're going to use, I think this is where you have to have good note-taking skills. And I love girls. They always do this, where they highlight everything, and then you see like the paper and it's all colors, and you're like, oh, good God. So I think it's one of those things where it's teaching them how to read and write. And so one of the things that I teach them, and it seems very elementary, but I have them do just to first, okay, you read the abstract, you read the conclusion, do a quick skim through. And as you're doing that skim through, just take note of like areas where you're starting to get confused. And I would say, and I usually have them in the left-hand margin, you're going to put a question mark. So that way it's like, they call it a signpost. This is called signposting. So to come back to it. And if it's something that you think is really, really important, put an exclamation point. And then when you do your second read it for detail this time. And this is where you're going to actually stop. And every time you put like a question mark, you're going to go look it up. You're going to figure out, and you're going to focus on these questions. What is it I don't understand about it? And why do I need to know this? Because if you can't answer, if you're like, if you've already skimmed it and your answer to this is, I didn't really need to know this to understand the article, then why are you looking it up? Because sometimes that does happen, that scientists do put things in there that aren't necessarily really for the general audience. It's sometimes just for themselves. Sometimes it's alluding to something they did or someone did and they want to give a nod to. But I think that's really important. What is it I don't understand about this, and why do I need to know this? And then with the exclamation point, why is this such essential information? So I have them do that, and that really helps them, because they need to have, it gets down to metacognition. Like, we can teach students the exact steps to read, but if we're not teaching them how to think about the reading, then they're just robots. And then at the end, I usually have like these big, I call them like these big synthesis questions that they need to answer. And it's basically what is the what am I taking away from this article? How did this contribute to science? What is great about their methodology? How did their methodology connect to that? And then how would I make changes? Where are there possible improvements? Where are there possible confounding variables? Where are there possible debates and things that we could question their methodology of the results? I call them like the big three.
Okay, and what about like using visual elements or design elements, or like taking it to the, how could I could call this, like experimenting in how to facilitate something that it's primary text and turn it into something else?
Yeah, I think visual. I have a workshop called this. It's called multimedia strategies and to increase engagement. I think multimedia can be, especially with articles, it can be both a blessing and a curse. It's like that, double-edged knife. It can go either way. Um, it has to be so students don't, and that's the thing is students don't know how to use media very well either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to watch when students read like if you were reading, like if I gave a student an article and watch how they read it, some look at all the graphics first.
Mm-hmm.
Some only read the article and don't look at the graphics till the very end. And then some are reading and then looking at the graphics as they go. So it's interesting to see how students interact with it. And that's something you have to teach them as well. It's amazing that it seems intuitive to you or me, but it's not intuitive to your students, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on if they're more of a visual person or not. Like, are they, because you can be like a visual learner, a tactile learner. So depending on how they learn, they will depend on how they approach the graphics.
But if you facilitate something like this, that you were saying that people that are like marking the phrases in different colors and that kind of stuff, if you facilitate that element from the article to begin with, does it makes a change, or it could be confusing, as you were saying?
It really just depends on how you're doing it. Like for example, when people put like the graphics or things like on the next page and it's not with the where it's supposed to be, people won't look at that graphic. It really just, or do you mean like the actual marking, like having like a tool where they can mark it?
It could be both. I don't know. It's like, the point is like, we want to, the following year, we want to do some experiments on different ways that the articles can be posted. And one of those is like, you can do a video about it. You can change like the graphic design of the page and add, not necessarily like add more elements, but to use typographic and color elements in the same text to highlight stuff,
Yeah.
or make
Oh my
like
God.
some things more important
Yeah.
than the rest. I don't know, something like that.
Well, it's so true. So like so some of the things I talk about in my multimedia seminar that I do, like for example, the largest thing on the screen, that's where your eye goes. So what's really interesting is that if you think about PowerPoint defaults,
Mm-hmm.
the title is the largest thing, but that's bad. I don't really care if you've seen the title of my slide. I want you to read what's underneath. And so actually, like if you look at like TED Ed or like some people who are using PowerPoints, you'll see they switch it. The title is actually small, and whatever the main thing you want the eye to look on is really big. Um, and color is really an interesting thing. I was actually just talking to someone the other day, and they like to use these bright colors. But what happens often with colors is, again, there's that cognitive moment of processing, where you are receiving what's on the screen before you're really processing the actual content. And so again, like those PowerPoint defaults are bright white. That bright white is blinding, where if you do like a subdued gray, it's like very calm and soothing. And I don't know if you've seen any of the studies on this, where just like things with like the color and the size can make such an impact on how people, what they retain, what they remember. was on the slide and how they interact with it. So it's, for me, it's like it's really important, especially with scientific article. I mean, you totally can manipulate the way a person interacts with an academic article when you start playing with all these design features, for sure. Yeah, it's insane.
Do you have any reference about this thing? Like, I know, like, my research is from design, but as a designer, I mean, but not like research from science about this kind of stuff. If you have some names or something that you could
I do.
search.
Let me see what I can quickly find right now. But yeah, it's like it's called the 12 multimedia principles, and there are a lot of articles on it. In terms of like what people are learning and things. I was going to show you the 12 multimedia principles if I can find them. Give me one moment. I know I have
Okay.
it.
And there's other like context thing that I think we will need to address, and it's the coronavirus crisis and the changes with this. And I'm still like beginning to question about this to the teachers, and I'm like finding some common ground, but it's not fully interesting because it's something that you know that it's happening, that they are frustrated, they cannot communicate with the students, the students kind of do a lot of trampa with their answers and the things that they should do, and probably doing some good design with the magazine could like do some experiments on this, but I don't know really how to focus this.
Yeah. Oh, you are like, in English, you are preaching to the choir right now. Yeah, I feel you 100%. Oh wait, let me open. Okay, hold on. This is what you want to, not that one, not that one. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
I'll send this to you as well. So if you
Okay.
can actually look up, I'll send you this in a PowerPoint, but you can look up these 12 principles, and there's research with all of them.
Okay.
But yeah, they're
Oof.
super cool.
Yeah, I want to see this in more detail.
Yeah, and
This is
again
awesome.
with all of these, it's where it's not with these principles, it's not just about doing it, it's doing it well. Because again, it's like if you overdo it, then you're distracting. If you don't do it enough, you're not getting their engagement. So this is not, this is all like having that balance. Really important. Um, like I can think about for like hypothesis, like pre-training could be pre-training is basically where you prepare the students in advance. Like this is what you're going to see. Like there's like little things you can do that subconsciously get the brain ready for what's coming next. And so that way when they get what's coming next, they're not focused on processing the page or the layout. It's just boom, content, because they've been pre-trained. So it's thinking about that cognitive, like how can you reduce? I don't know. Do you do a lot with cognition in the brain? Sorry, I
Not
don't
really.
know.
I have just looked at it, and sometimes I read about it, but
Okay. Sorry,
I'm
I don't
I
know
can
my
say I'm
audience. I'm
ignorant about
sorry.
it. So
No, but it's like crazy. Like we have to think about when you're taking in the whole, like your world or whatever's going on, like even this conversation right here. You have to think about you're processing my face, like you're like, oh, she's this white girl, you know. But when you're doing that, you're in that moment, your brain is not focused on what I'm saying. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but we have to think about that all the time. How is our brain toggling from these other sensories? And so using these 12 principles of multimedia can help you get the students to target on your message only and ignore all that other cognitive processing. And one of the biggest mistakes university professors do, and in academia and in textbooks, is we get all this other distractor stuff and we don't realize that the students are spending more cognitive ability and energy just processing that exam. Like, okay, this is the format of the exam. Oh, okay. Where you could give the format to the exam of the students, you could actually show them a sample. You could black out all the words, but if they just saw the format, then the day of, they would do better.
Mhm.
And we actually, with a physics professor, even showed that. We did just simple formatting, same exam for physical dos that she used the previous semester. We just formatted differently. We prepped the students on that format, and her averages went up so much. And
Wow.
students even thanked her for it. But it's those things like that we got to think about. How are we helping them focus all their cognitive ability just on learning? And it makes it's less anxiety. It makes them feel better. They enjoy it more.
Yeah, this is awesome. This is something I wanted to try with these experiments the next year. So if you have this documented, that would be really great to see how it happened. Because one thing that we wanted to do was exactly that, like take some normal content and make two groups. One group of students working with the normal content, and one group working with design content, and see what happened.
Yeah, you could
So
totally do like a little, like kind of a little, I guess, encuesta, but it'd be more like a prueba where they have to
mhm,
recap and answer questions and things. But then you could do a few where you have them talk me through what you're seeing, and you can actually kind of compare the difference.
mhm.
There's this really old experiment called the gorilla. My students actually read it as it's my sample. It's their first week reading assignment. It's called The Gorilla in the Room. It's a psychology article. So I have them read that so that way no one feels like, oh, the math people are at an advantage. So I choose one where it's like you're all in the same and it's psychology, so it's easy. But The Gorilla in the Room was this experiment where a gorilla would run through this video they were watching where these people are passing
I have
the ball.
seen this. Yeah,
Yeah, and so many people don't see the gorilla.
yeah,
So
yeah.
my students read a different article. They actually took it where these they're like these scans, these magnetic scans of the brain, or I think it's the brain, or is it the lung, of some part of the body. I can't know. I can't remember. And these trained experts are looking at them, and what they found is that they would actually take a gorilla and put it in the scans, and the experts weren't able to see it because they've gotten so used to being, trained to just look for these things that they ignored it. So it was really interesting
Yeah.
to show. They took that gorilla experiment even further to show this idea of like novice brain versus expert brain. And so even an expert brain on the task
Has a blind spot.
has a blind spot. And so we don't realize like so much of what we present, we have so much power. I always tell my professors that whatever your students are doing, I'm not saying that you're a bad person, but you have probably about 95% of control of all the behavior of your students. So however they're behaving, you're in some way controlling that with the message you're giving. You just may not realize it.
And what about the people that produce those texts? Have
Uh,
you done something like on like I don't know if you have worked with the people that produce text for hypotheses.
I have not. I haven't really done much with them. And honestly, like my multimedia, like I read articles about it. I don't usually do research on multimedia. It's not my area, but I read a lot about it. But I do incorporate it, and I do encourage. Like I actually do. One of the seminars I do with my professors is Death by PowerPoint: How to Use Multimedia to Not Kill Your Students. Um, so I don't actually do research usually related to multimedia. I have not talked to anyone in hypothesis other than Martha, but Martha and I have so many other things we do. We've never really talked details about hypothesis.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Neither about like showing the science that is made in La Universidad, the university, to the students in some new way.
Yeah. She and I
Apart from the classes, I mean.
She and I had once talked about too, because something I have done a couple times now and I published them is I'll take some of the research professors are doing and I turn it into like a curriculum activity. And then we've actually done them at like Marymount and Gimnasio Moderno, like we'll actually do the activities and give it to the teachers so the teachers can do it. And
Mhm.
so because I have been a colegio teacher for 15 years, what I'll do is I make sure that it's something that's age appropriate, but also not it's aligns with the optativos. So it's not like an extra thing when teachers have time because teachers don't have time.
Mhm.
So I make sure that it goes along with like their regular, biologia or química. Um, so she and I have talked about that because I think it would be really cool, like for people to, and I know we talked about it was something with, she was sharing me an article. I think this was oh yeah, it was February. It was February. It was right before the pandemic hit. There was like they were going to publish an article in the spring about optics or something. I was like, I have a great optics activity. Like it'd be really
Mhm.
cool to like be able to get colegios like to read an article and do an activity.
Mhm.
Because I think when you have younger students, if they do something and then afterward they can read the article, they now have this whole experience. They have foundational knowledge. They have an interaction. And so when they read the article and they can say, oh, this is applying, this is what we saw when we did this little experiment.
Mhm.
Oh, this is the real science. And for me, that's really important. One, it promotes good learning for those colegio students. They have an experience that's anchored, they have a little foundation. It helps them read the article better, understand the article. But I also like it because it helps them see real, authentic science.
Mhm.
Um, I hate to say this, but so much of the science that I see, like some of the colegios do, it's like I call it, I'm like, that's not real science because your teacher's telling you what to do. When you're
Yeah.
doing real science, you're making the question.
Mhm.
You're designing the methods, you're trying things out. And most teachers don't teach science that way. And so I think it's good for them to be able to see and how real science is done. And I love in my introduction science course, they have to do the last 4 weeks, they have to design a project. And they're like, well, tell me what to do. I went, that's not how this works. And then I gas them all. Some of them get really frustrated. They're like, answer my question. I'm like, no, no, no. This is the process. And I'm going to just respond to you with more questions. And
Yeah.
some of them figure that out too. They're like, don't ask her. She's just going to ask us more questions. So let's just think about it and answer the questions on her own. And then we'll talk to her. And I'm like, good, you got it.
And how could I ask this? Like, what do you think about games and playing
So,
involved in this?
so games and playing are really great because, well, okay, mixed. It's a balance. Um,
Hmm.
and again, I'm seeing gamification at Uniandes, particularly with Connectate. They're like promoting it everywhere, and they're doing it, I would say, in the very wrong way. This is my opinion. I hate to say it. Gamification is a fad right now.
Hmm.
So with any educational fad, they usually last for like 5 years and then they're gone. Um, I There is a science to why games are great. It does help when your amygdala, it's sending out these stress hormones. It's a moment for you to laugh, have fun. It will help you be less stressed, and then you'll be better able to receive what you're learning. Games can be great for that. The problem is a lot of times what I'm seeing at the university level is the games they're doing are not, they're childish, they're silly, they
Hmm.
sometimes feel insulting,
Hmm.
and also they're not actually doing what they intend to do. So sometimes the motivation behind the game becomes the game itself and not the learning of the content. So
Hmm.
for example, there was this one program that Connectate was doing where they were focusing on, the students were more focused on achieving like these little medals and things to decorate their avatar than they were the actual content. And for me, I'm like, do you not? And they're like, they were so engaged. I went, engaged on a damn avatar. Who gives a shit? Sorry. I'm like, that doesn't, who cares? Like, who cares? So again, it's like that. It can be good, but I see so many times it gets abused. And so I think where you like maybe like I could see something with hypothesis could be, you know, I'm not sure. I was going to say something, but then I didn't like what I was going to say. The other problem with gamification, here's what I was going to share. Maybe you did something where they got like every time they read an article and they were able to interact with it, they got like a little like medal or something. But that's bad in itself because now you're intrinsically motivating. They're not intrinsically motivated. Their motivation is achieving this and not
Mhm.
the love of reading. And that's where gamification is really tricky because are you taking away what is the motivation? Is it the motivation of learning or is the motivation of getting these badges or medals or these like different levels? And so for me, I view gamification as it can be great if you can't naturally engage your audience. Okay, go there, but you got to be really careful. And I don't mean to sound arrogant here. I don't use it because I can't engage my students. I've never been able to not engage my students. I don't need to use games to do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I was thinking in a particular example that I find like is like a useful game, and maybe you see it is when this thing about COVID appeared. There was this game that you can modify molecules to create
Yeah,
how do you call it, like
like compound.
una vacuna.
See, see, see.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
like people were adding information to the system, and that is like not is not going anywhere. Like it's like getting data to the scientists to interpret and to see what people are trying to mix to make that formula, and that
yeah,
was
and that's
awesome. It was a
awesome.
game.
And that's awesome. So, but see, it's like it's looking at. It's just important to keep yourself grounded when you start doing that. What's the motivation of the participant? And this is feeling a community, feeling a part of something, contributing. So that's motivation for all the good reasons. It's not motivation for a level or an award. And so I think that's just really whatever you do gamification wise, like I said, it's really positive. It helps reduce stress, your cortisone levels. It makes you relax and be able to focus on the content, just as long as it has good motivation.
Yeah, but this motivation is like coming from their personal experience and interests, or do you, or have you identified something like you say, like this is transversal between scientists, and you can grab yourself from that?
Yeah, there's different kinds of motivation. You have, and this is there's 8 types of motivation, and so it can be really dangerous depending on and it's personal. Everyone's different, and so that's why you want to get something that be very careful with what you choose gamification wise. I was just going to say something. What were you
About,
just saying? I lost
about
it.
the how do they get like I forgot the word like their motivation, these 8 possibilities of motivation that you say.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going with it, but I forgot. But yeah, I mean, gamification could be like it's one of those things. You can use it really well, or you can use it very dangerously. Um,
Mhm. And what about art science, like Olafur Eliasson, and what was the name of the other girl that the Netflix abstract series, Neri Oxman, and those kind of people, like they mix science with art, and they like bring science to the like our common ground as
oh yeah,
humans.
yeah. No, I think that's really amazing. So I actually have worked with a lot of artist scientists. I have a good friend. She does comic strips. She actually sailed. So I have an oceanography master's, and she sails on these ships. She sailed on a ship that I was on, and her whole job was to just make a little comic each day about the science we did, and it was really cool. That's actually a great thing you can do too. So the physics professor, that's what I was going to say. The physics professor I was telling you about who just changed her test, one of
Mhm.
the other things she did, not gamification, but to get the reason why you use a game is to make you relax and have fun for a moment and de-stress. So her first page of her test was like, one, it was like, breathe, remember everything you've learned, take small steps. It was like some like coaching strategies. Remember, breathe again, oxygen, get it to the brain, and ask yourself, well, what do I know? What can I do? Start small and let one little thing lead to the next. And then she put a cartoon that was about the content they were looking at, and it was funny. And that was the first page, and everyone had to read it. They couldn't open the exam until they've read that. And it's just one of those things where it's reminding you, like, one, how to approach the test, but then it was a moment where you could laugh. And they have done research on that too, just these moments of fun. So I could see, even with hypothesis, if you welcomed people to be artists and draw like funny little things about the articles in there, that can be a really great thing as well. And then I could see myself as a teacher if I was teaching like in a colegio. I love doing this, starting a class with a cartoon. Even in, actually in university, I've done this too. I'll start a class with a cartoon and say, let them read it, let them laugh, and say, okay, well, what's going on here? What does this relate? How does this relate to what we're talking to? Then you can go deeper into the science and share the articles, share all this other stuff. But they've started from a funny place that bridged them to that nerdier place, and they're ready to go. And so you can get these games or funny moments in there in a lot of really cool ways.
Have you tried science fiction?
Yeah, I have. It's, for me personally, it's a hard thing because I don't like fiction. So for me, it's been hard. The other reason why it's been hard too is because it takes a lot of curriculum time to have students read a science fiction book and connect it. I haven't been very successful in doing it in a core class. Now, an elective class, it's a lot easier to do. And it is really great. The only time I've ever been able to do it well in a core class, it was actually a younger class. It was with 14-year-old students, but we didn't read fiction. We read a book. It was a nonfiction book. It was a history book. But my point is, I did get a book that wasn't science. It was a history book about the atomic bomb, and we were doing waves and radiation and physics. And they were actually designing a project where they had to design a project with different types of seeds that have been exposed to radiation and measuring their growth. And so they read this book, they were doing modules on the science and then designing their own research project. And we kind of were putting it all together. And I did that because it was helping them understand like this big issue of this big global international issue and how it impacted life. And I wanted them to see all that. But yeah, I think there is potential. I'll say that's a weakness of mine. I'm not very good to it. I would not be the best person to talk about how you deal with science fiction and helping people.
Yeah, but this thing of putting science into context, like science fiction do it like pretty well, because you can imagine like the worst and the best outcomes of anything that science can bring. So what I'm seeing like in some interviews is like people that is really immersed in their subject. They're not seeing what's the things that's happening in the context that they are affecting, and they are creating some kind of context that they don't even understand, and they sometimes don't even value the commentaries of people in areas like social sciences, and it's interesting because I don't know if it's possible to combine those contexts in a way that you don't put the science apart.
Yeah, it's one of the things. Well, it's like I told you earlier. They don't like education people, but people. This is how I get introduced. This is Stephanie. She's our science education person. She has a PhD, but don't worry. She speaks her language. She's a scientist. That's how I get introduced. Like I need that. Like I don't say that about myself, but that's what someone I'll hear. But don't worry, you're gonna love her. She's a scientist. She gets us. That's what they say all the time. It's hilarious. Yeah,
it's like a bubble.
Yeah, and I will say, like, people have asked me to do like general teaching workshops, and research shows that when you do, like, if you put all the professors in one place, it doesn't work. They have to be separated out by subject. And even doing all the science and math people together, it's a challenge, it's a skill to do. I think there is a value when you make these bigger connections interdisciplinary, but it's something you have to be really careful with because you will turn the science people off. And it's because they speak differently. So social science people, oh good God. This is why I did not stay in the School of Education, because it was a lot of like social science, like history, some like the dean, I think he's like literature, or I don't know. They talk so much and I'm like, shut up.
Yeah,
Like,
everything is ambiguous.
ah. They're like, well, let's talk this out. I'm like, no, I'm like, they're like, Stephanie, you're being science brain. I'm like, no, can we just have an answer? Let's just debate it out, get to an answer. Like, they're like, no, we need, and I'm like, no, we don't need to talk this much. Um, you can tell too very quickly, like you can be I would be in a workshop that was had from the School of Ed and it would have all the disciplines. I could be like, you're a social scientist, you're a scientist, you're an art person, like you're in hippy dippy land. Like you can just tell by the way they're talking. It's just like, oh my goodness. Yeah. So you got to be really careful when you mix those things up. But I do think it is important. Oh, this is random, but something else to think about is that sense of self. And I'm very conscientious of this one because I'm a gringa. It's why Martha laughs at me, but she knows this is really important to me. But whenever we do like these events with outreach events, they'll be like, hey, well, why don't you do something? I said, no, no, no. I don't like to ever do the speaking because I'm a white person and it's Colombia. They need to see a Colombiana. They need to see themselves. And a lot of students, particularly the Latinas, they do not see themselves in science, or they don't see enough strong role models or people like them. And it's also economics too. So sometimes they see like, oh, that's that rich person who's always living a strato cinco or seis their whole life. I don't see me in there. So I try it. Like one of my favorite speakers I take with me is this. She just finished her master's and she did not grow up wealthy. And she's like a total badass in oceanography. So it's really cool to bring her because she's young, she's a Latina, and she comes from a lower strato. And the students just love her. And she at first was like, Stephanie, I don't do kids. I don't like talking to kids. Like, and now she loves it because she sees this as a way she can give back. And then she's like, I wish I had someone like that, like me coming to my school, because it would have helped change the way I interact. And so it's even like just thinking about, do you share people's pictures? Do you share their bios? Because sometimes sharing pictures and bios can turn people off because they can see, oh, this is just a bunch of rich Colombianos here. Like there's no women, there's no like diversity. And you can just tell that. I mean, I hate to say it, but we can tell it by their features and their face even. We may not be correct. I know a lot of people, they think I come from Uniandis is hard for me. They think because I'm white, I come from wealth. I actually come from a very poor family in the United States. And being around Uniandis people, I'm like, you guys are so wealthy, I can't deal with you all. And they're like, but you're from the United States. I'm like, you guys are wealthier than I am. But they assume that just because of the way I look. And so it's something to think about too, like just sharing pictures and bios. Is this helping? Is this not helping? How is this impacting your students?
This is really interesting. For example, when I was speaking with the people from Ciencias, I was asking to them like, how was their interaction with the people, with the locals in the places they were working in when we were in the volcano in Ecuador where they're doing their work and stuff. And it's really like difficult to make people get interested in the sciences when they see this thing that you are telling me. Like they are people from Bogota, they are white and educated, no, and they are from a town and they understand the volcano, they know what happens with the volcano, they work with the scientists, so they hear the language about the geosciences about it, but they don't find themselves going to a university and studying these sciences. And
Breaks your heart.
yeah, and I don't know, because it's something like you can do something about it, but this is the problem here is this, like, why choosing this person because of their skin color or their wealth, no? And you're saying like, no, but this is a science magazine,
Well,
and
I think so. For me, like, I have a project with that I was doing with Nat Geo and on San Andres, and I was talking to this fisherman who was maybe 80 years old, Victor, and he was telling me all about the fishing industry, how there were a couple species we were talking about in particular, and he could tell me the life history of it, the size, how long they live, where they are, when they are. And he was telling me, he's like, in the 80s when Colombia became more invested in the island, because of course he doesn't call himself Colombian, he's a San Andrean. He was telling me how the Colombian government changed it from per pound to per organism, per number. And so he said all the locals, for us, that was really difficult because we are only going to catch up to a certain, we're going to catch from a size, a big one, because we know that if we do too small, it has to go through like 3 more reproduction cycles. And we know how that's going to affect the numbers. But then you have this commercialization and these industry we're just taking. And it was just amazing. I think I talked to him for like 2 hours and he's telling me all this. And I said to him at the end, thank you so much. He goes, why? I'm just like a note fisherman. I went, you have no idea. I've been trying to get this information and looking it up, and you just gave me an entire like natural history. I said, this could go in a book. This isn't published anywhere. And he was just like, you're crazy. And I think for me, this is my approach to teaching and doing science is we're all natural born scientists. We might not all be academia, but we're all scientists. And I think something that's really cool is when you start highlighting that idea, like maybe an hypothesis where you have articles that's like, you don't have to have a PhD. It could be an article from Victor, the San Andrean fisherman, sharing his recent observations in the field. That's science. So I think it's really important where we think about our students, like how are we reinforcing what is science, and not this idea that you have to have a PhD to be doing science, but you've been doing science since you came out and you were, a baby trying things and learning and you were essentially doing a science experiment. Oh, don't do that. That makes me cry. You learn. That's science. You just did an experiment. And so I think that's really cool if you can think about who's doing the publishing. Do you have students doing it? Do you have indigenous people doing it? Do you have people that aren't just from the Uniandes PhD crowd? And I think you can have such an impact in that way of how students see what science is. Yeah, it's awesome. Something to also think about is where you put people's names. So
what do you mean?
So they've done a lot of research. This is going to be more for assessments, but it holds true for like an article. So they have actually, and the physics teacher I told you about, she did this as well. They have done things where it's called the self-perception bias. So they have had students who recognize themselves first. And this is true on like a standardized test. When you're bubbling things, it says put your name, nombre, apellido, your gender, your estrato, and like you do all these identify. It's stereotype threat. You've now identified yourself. And they have found with Latinas, especially women, but especially Latinas, if they do something, even just writing their nombre, where it's like, this is who I am, they will do worse on that physics test or math test. It's really strong in physics and math. If you have them take the test and write their name at the end, they will score better because they didn't identify, they didn't get that contextualization. Like, I am Stephanie Toro. I am a Latina. And then, like, it's just these little stereotypes that society has that affect them. I don't do well in physics. I don't do well in math. And I think it's really true with an article. Like, if you read an article and you don't know who wrote it, you'll engage with it very differently if you know that it was a white man or a rich man than like a woman. Like you will engage differently with it. Like if you have the bio and it's clear it's a woman, I guarantee a lot of people are going to read through that and they're going to be, you know, really picking through and being like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And so there's so many things to think about, like how people engage. Like it's just, it can be overwhelming. Sorry,
yeah, it is. Yeah, but this is really like really useful things, and I have like a lot of things I want to question you about. The thing is, like, I think we already passed our
we did.
time. So, do you mind if we could arrange another conversation anytime, like in the following, I don't know, 3 weeks?
Sure. Yeah. Just have what works best is just have Yasmin schedule it. I keep my calendar up to date, but my calendar changes quickly.
All right.
So I would say like once you pick a date, send the schedule out so it's in the slot. Because otherwise, like it might change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I say it because we have, I don't know if you can, and if you are interested, it would be really great if you could be there, because we're designing this survey I told you, and then in the following year we're gonna do those experiments, and you know better a lot of things than that. I would really appreciate it if we could work with you with this. Anytime you have free for this, I will really be really happy to speak to you for this.
Okay, that sounds great. And wait, I just want to recap. I am sending the Asking Questions PDF book, some stuff on Think Aloud protocol,
and this 12 principles
stuff on the 12 principles and multimedia. Correct? Was there anything else?
You mentioned the TAP protocol and the cognitive apprentice model.
Okay, yeah, I can send that too.
That would be great.
Okay.
Well, Stephanie, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I feel like we talked about a lot of things. I hope I didn't overwhelm you.
Well, I need some time to process all and get it organized, but it's amazing. So
I think it's really cool. You have a lot of potential to do to really have a big impact on how people view science and appreciate science. And for me, that's ultimately why I do what I do. I want everyone to love learning and teaching about science as much as I do. That's really why I do what I do.
Yeah, we hope that the magazine does that exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I was also going to share with you the things for my course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll share those too.
Can you share those to the email?
Yep.
Because I'm in the mobile here, so probably this chat will disappear.
Yeah, I'll share all of this. I'll just email you everything.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Ciao.
Ciao.